Okay, so we said we would do this eventually, and then I was at a friend of mine's over Hanukkah. He had just given a shir on it and added sources, so I combined mine, which have the translations, and his, which don't, to it. But yeah, so we earlier in the year we said we'd get to this, which is the question of how does Hilchot Kashrut play out in modern times? And as we'll see in a second, the question is as follows. Basically, all of Hilchot Kashrut, before we actually get to this, as a general rule, I find that people misunderstand the laws of kashrus in very serious ways. People are much too machmir. Ray Ginsburg can confirm this, right? When it comes to what that with kasher shaylas, people are much more machmir than they need to. Right? 90% of the time, someone calls a rabbi and he says it's fine, and they're like, "Really? Right. It's fine? Yes, it's really fine."
Or to put it, to take it on the other side of the coin, there's been plenty of times I've bought something that doesn't have an OU on it, and people come in and like, that can't be kosher. So I try to explain to them, OU is not the definition of kashrus.
Yes. The same as if they accidentally put the OU on like pork, it doesn't make it kosher, right. You know. But 90% of the time it's not lechumra, it's lekula. It's right, like people call and they say, "My God, my dairy spoon accidentally fell in my fleishik sink. What do I do?" And the answer is nothing. Rinse it, you know. Nothing.
The worst is they go, "I took the knife and I stuck it into the ground 10 times."
Oh, for God's sake. Yes. And it's like, that is a very local kula to get off oil.
Right.
Is that what you did? Yeah, exactly.
Can we have a shir about that?
Last Shabbat, the Chashma Shabbat?
No, Kashrut.
We're doing.
This is the whole. Oh, this is the whole shir.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's the shir. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Okay. Now you see the title. Good.
Bounced off me back to Rabbi Ziring.
Okay. Perfect.
This is great.
Perfect. Okay. Good. So here's the problem. That the number one rule in kashrus, in terms of, and I don't mean certain things, people get right because they're obvious, right? Like when you say you can't cook milk and meat together. Yes, that's correct. Don't do that. That is not a chumrah. That is a pasuk in the Torah. But a lot of the other things that we have, people misunderstand because we're so used to having two separate sets of dishes and things like that, that when they accidentally get mixed up, suddenly we panic. Right? I know, like, you know, when I got married, this was particularly bad because Ura was at a double advantage over me in terms of understanding what was going on. First of all, she had learned Yeridea the year before I did. Right? I learned it in Smicha the year after she did it in GPATS. The second was that in my parents' house, we almost never had meat. I'm a vegetarian, my mother's a vegetarian, we barely ever had meat in the house. So, like, these things just didn't happen. And Ura's family, you know, is like, not like that, right? You know, they have meat and they have milk, and therefore mistakes can happen, and you have to ask shilas. In my parents' house, it just didn't happen. So everything is more panicked when you don't know. You don't know. You're just not used to the problems that can come up. So I would always freak out if anything happened before I learned Yeridea, and Ora would be, was always like, "Look, just wait till you learn it. You will calm down." Normally it happens the other way, but this way it happened that way, which is probably healthier. But the rule, in a nutshell, that all these things come down to is, in halacha, what's known as ta'am. Taste. Right? What creates the problems is transference of taste. Right? Meaning, 90% of the time, you're not talking about someone accidentally cooked milk and meat. What you're talking about is they used their milk pot for meat. They used their meat pot for milk. They accidentally took the wrong spatula and they took a spatula and they mixed it in the wrong soup, they mixed it in the wrong omelet, they mixed it in the wrong this, they made pasta, parve pasta in a fleishik pot, and now they want to use it for macaroni and cheese, or they accidentally, these are the shilas that come up. Even more common, right? I accidentally cut an onion with a dairy knife. Now what do I do with the onion? Isn't it true that onion is magic, right? And it, and then, they'll call the rabbi, and the rabbi will say, well, it depends. When was the pot clean? When was the last time it was used? Was it used 24 hours ago? Was it used 12 hours ago? And all those types of questions. Now, what are all these questions about? So the question is really taste, right? Is that in halacha, in addition to problematic foods being not kosher, the taste of problematic foods, whether that be non-kosher food, or I accidentally cooked pig in my pot, or milk and meat mixing, which is a bit more makil. I mean, milk and meat is machmir, but because you're dealing with two tastes that them independently are mutter, right? There are certain leniencies that are attached to that. It all comes down to halachic assumptions about taste. Now, we're not going to go through every issue, but that is like 90% of the shilas are versions of the taste shaila. And that's the questions of bittul, right? 1 in 60, right? I'm sure you've heard these, right? But it's, right, if a little bit of milk falls into the chulin, all that stuff. The problem is as follows. Our pots are just not the same as the pots that Chazal are talking about, the Rishonim are talking about, the classic halachic literature is talking about. They're just not. They don't absorb in the same way. Right? It's hard to figure out exactly how much they do absorb, but they don't absorb in the same way. They just don't. You know that. Because if you've ever taken a pot, which was used an hour ago for I don't know what, cleaned it out and boiled a pot of water in it, and then used that water to make tea or coffee, right? It doesn't taste like your mushroom barley soup. It just doesn't. Right? There is no sense in which it tastes like your mushroom barley soup. It just tastes like tea. Right? Unless it's dirty. But if it's clean, our pots just don't absorb. This is Rav Shlomo Zalman's non-scientific way of posing this problem, which is you just know that your food, your pots, they just don't have taste. So what do you do? Right? Methodologically, what do you do when the assumptions of halacha, the reality assumptions that halacha are based on, are different? Either because Chazal or the Rishonim were wrong, or, in this case, not per se wrong. It's not really wrong, it's just that we have different materials. We have stainless steel, they didn't have stainless steel. Right? Things like that. So what do you do? Okay? And this is sort of a good, besides the local issue, it is also a good question to look at because it helps you understand the way poskim deal with, methodologically speaking, issues that come up like this. So the posek who's dealt with it most extensively in recent years has been Rav Elazar Melamud, who's a very important posek in Israel, and he still is coming out with the Pinini Halacha volume on Kashrut. So the way it shakes out exactly in his final assessment of the sugya is not, I haven't seen yet, but 90% of his position you can see here, and we're not going into the nitty gritty details anyways. So for our purposes, it's fine. What I want to do is combine basically. When I gave this in Toronto, I just went through Rav Melamud as a sort of a case study, but I combined it with my friend's source sheet, Rabbi Adam Friedman, who basically collected a few of the other modern positions that were published in response to an article assessing this problem. Assessing this problem, and I think by comparing and contrasting the different the different types of arguments that have been made, we get an insight to the way modern psak deals with issues of this sort. Okay, so So I was nice enough that on the things that I had translations for, I left them on. Why not? So you can follow in. Well, again, in the beginning, these are my translations. Let's start with the English number one. Okay, this frames the question. So in the last few months in yeshiva, we dealt with the big questions regarding koshering or kashering, however you want to call it in English, vessels that were used to cook forbidden foods such as meat and milk or treif. It became clear beyond any doubt, both from scientific studies and from the experiments by all people who tested this in their kitchens at home, that our metal pots do not absorb taste, and thus do not spit them out either. In halacha, that's called kivah lo kach palto. As it comes in, it comes out. Right? He just said, look, our pots don't absorb. Right? You want the scientific. So if you look on page 2, this was from an article called Bliau Pleitav Kelim L'Orto Tzora Mivchana Madai by Rav Dror Flitzer and Yair Frank. You see their charts. If you look on page 2, they did some experiment which later on food scientists said to them, it wasn't great, right? They put in they did different ones like radioactive isotopes and different taste things and different chemicals that glow in the dark, and you put it in, washed it out, and then turned off the lights. Did it glow? Right? Things like that.
Sorry, is that from last time? Like the handout?
No. So you didn't have one? Sorry. I didn't know where I put one. Yeah, 2 pages. The translations, it's actually not as long. I just put in translations and charts. Now again, after they published the article, some food scientists wrote to them and said, that's not how you do an experiment to figure out taste. But, so fine. If I cared about the exact numbers of how much absorption is happening, then I would be more worked up about it. But fundamentally, as Rav Melamed says, halacha it doesn't matter halakhically whether it absorbs 1 in a million or 1 in 1,000, right? If it absorbs less than 1 in 60, then it really doesn't matter, right? Like, it doesn't matter. So, forget, you can look at the experiment here, right, of how many parts per million or whatever they put, in the different tests that they did, right? They did it with, you see it with like different dyes and whatever it is. But the point is, Rav Melamed had a much simpler way, which was, we looked at the science, like in this article, and you can see their conclusion is in 9, right? Besides for clay, right? Besides for porcelain, things don't absorb. And in halacha, that's true, right? In halacha, porcelain is the most machmir, the one that's not kosherable. And they said, that's true. I assume they're talking about non-glazed.
What about like cast iron?
Oh, so cast iron you actually want to leave the taste in, right? No, that obviously. That's not because the metal absorbs as much as you actually leave the taste. Yeah. Right. Cast iron, for sure. Okay. Cast iron, yeah, that's... and he says, no fachad gamim b'yachas l'mayim b'nisuya gadol arbe yoter mikol kli bishul ragil and avacham mutzal shegamim, and he goes to the exact numbers. But again, the exact numbers, if you want, I gave it to you if you're interested in looking at their study, but no, it was also a bit flawed. But the conclusion is basically everybody knows this is true, right? So, like, to give you an example, this is probably, look, you can do their scientific study, you can do the Rav Melamed test, which is go home, cook something, right? Cook soup in a pot, then cook water, put it in your tea, see if you taste the food, right? That's the very simple, right, at-home test that you can do. Rav Donnie Wolf, when I was in Gush, used to say, I have a better proof, which is that the way we kosher industrial plants and pipes because they are treif halachically, is that we run steam filled with ammonia through them, because halachically the poison will wipe out the taste. But he said, if you actually thought in reality that the walls absorbed and would spit out the poison, we would all die. It's because we know that it doesn't really absorb that we can use the poison to kosher the kalim. But if we thought it actually absorbed, right, obviously we wouldn't use the poison, because we are aware of the fact that this isn't actually happening, right? We're just koshering because of halachic taste, right? But there is no taste there. So the question then is, what do you do? Right? This is the question, right? And he says, meaning, right, going back to Rav Melamed, meaning, if one cooks milk in a pot that was used to cook meat an hour before and it was cleaned well, there will not be any taste of meat in the milk. Similarly, if one cooks treif meat and then cleans the pot well, and immediately afterward he cooks a vegetable dish, no taste of treif meat will be detected in the vegetables. Seemingly, according to this, the Torah commandment to kosher metal vegetables that has been used to cook treif has become null and void. Right? This should be the conclusion. Right? That you shouldn't have to kosher things, you should just have to clean them. You should be able to use the same pots for milk and meat. You should, right, every time something accidentally falls in the wrong sink, you'll say, that's fine as long as the sink was clean. Right? That doesn't mean we should get rid of everything, right? Obviously your china is still cheres, right? That still absorbs, and you might want to have 2 sinks for practical purposes, right? Meaning this all assumes that it's clean, right? Obviously if you leave like real pieces of food sitting at the bottom of your sink, and you clean your dishes in boiling hot water, right? Or, then you might have problems.
But isn't it, like, not edible?
Well, it depends when the soap went in, right? Meaning it depends what type of person.
At the bottom of the sink.
Well, it depends, right? Meaning theoretically, certain people are just like, don't care if their sink gets clogged up, so they just like, put their plates with still food in, and then like, it's edible, I guess, right? Once you put soap in, it's not, right? But again, we can come up with all types of situations. But fundamentally, a lot of the laws that we know about koshering and meat and milk dishes and sinks and things like that are going to become irrelevant, Not everything will become irrelevant, right? Meaning nothing you're going to do is going to say that you can cook a cheeseburger, right? That's not going to happen. Then really it does absorb. But a lot of these questions, or, again, the case in which you're most likely to get a chumrah is if you call and say, I cut an onion with the wrong knife. Because onions are, davar charif, they're sharp, and therefore they have all types of interesting halachos attached to them. But if that's not true, right, your knife is not absorbing taste, the onion is not absorbing taste, then all those halachas and all the problems that come with them are going to disappear. So what do? So let's set up what halachic issues we need to answer, and then we'll methodologically go through the different approaches and how you deal with this reality. Okay, so first let's start with koshering. Where does the mitzvah come to kosher from? So it comes from number 2, from Milchemet Midyan. That after the Jews fight the Midianites, so they acquire a lot of new possessions during the war from the spoils of war, and Eliezer tells them, right? Vayomer Elazar Kohen on Shetzava Vayomer Lachamazot Chuchara Torah Shir Tziva Adonai et Moshe. Ooh, I put Shemos on this. Great. Okay, this. Afterwards, if you either put it in Shemos, hold on to it, or give it to me, I'll put it in Shemos because I have Shem Hashem on it. Great. Anything you have, gold, silver, bronze, iron, lead, all that goes through fire shall be passed through fire. Anything that has gone through water must go through water. What does that mean? So in Pshat, there are all types of machlokot. Does this mean that this is a way of purifying things from tumat mate, right? From dead impurity? Is this a halacha about removing some sort of metaphysical association with idolatry? But halachically, the way we take it is that this is about kashrus, and that's what you get in number 3, right? The Gemara tells you that Tanur Rabbanan halokech klitash mishmena of kochavim. If you buy equipment, you buy vessels, you buy pots and pans from non-Jews. Dvarim shalom nishtamesh behen matbilin ve'tarin. If it's new, it's never been used, so it needs tfilat kelim, which has nothing to do with kashrus. That's a mitzvah that when you acquire something from a non-Jew, if it's metal, so midaraisa, you have to bring it to the mikvah. If it's glass, so derabanan. Dvarim shenishtamesh ben alidei tzonein. What if it was something that was used through cold, like kagon, kosot, kitoniot, utzlochiot, plates, cups? They use cold food. So what's the halacha? How do you kosher them? Right, you buy a cup from a non-Jew, a glass cup that's only used for orange juice. Right, what do? What? You have to bring it to the mikvah, and what else do? Madichan, you rinse it, right? He used it for non-kosher grape juice. You get a wine glass, right? So the wine that he is not, it's very complicated. You put it in the sink, you rinse it, they put it in the mikvah, and then it's fine. That's it, right? Madichan dorin. Dvarim shenishtamesh ben alidei chamen. But what if it's the type of thing that's used with hot water? Kagon ayarot v'kumkum mazinim v'chamei chamen, like pots and pans. So what's the halacha? Magilan umatvilan v'hein teorin. Anything that the primary cooking is done through a liquid medium. So how do you kosher it? What we call hagala. Hagala is you boil it out. Right? You probably know this from Pesach, right? Yeah. Some things again, we live in a very wealthy society, relatively speaking, so we just have pots and pans for Pesach. But certain things, your water urn, I don't know, right?
Countertops.
Yeah, your countertops, the sinks, right? Your stainless steel sinks. In Israel, it's much more common for people to actually kosher it because it's just easy, right? You'll go like in any city, there will be people standing in like near shuls in set stations with these like 6-foot tall, boiling hot tubs of water, and you like give them like 10 shekel, and they will kosher all of your stuff, and then they'll be there with blow torches, and anything that needs blow torching, they'll torch. And it depends where you are. In certain places, it's adults. In certain places, it's like 14-year-old, 15-year-old kids, which is a bit...
Questionable.
Halachically, it's fine.
No.
Safety-wise, absolutely terrifying.
My
It's-
God, you just handed a 14-year-old kid a blowtorch. and
Yes.
tell her
They just
what
leave it on the street. It's unbelievable. It's really...
The
What?
coolest but weirdest thing ever.
It's amazing. It's just... It's unbelievably terrifying.
the name
So... But that's what you do. You boil them out. Dvarim shenishtamesh behen al yedei or, things that you cook with fire, directly with fire. Kagon hashvudin v'askalot, like a spit, right? Think a shawarma spit, right? Right where, like that, okay? A grill, a barbecue, things like that, okay? So then, milabedonu matvilim vein torrents. You have to whiten them with fire, right? We have to make them red hot or white hot, whatever, right?
That's not easy.
Hence the blowtorch, right? That's the blowtorch. That's why the easiest way to kosher an oven is if you have a self-cleaning, you put it on, it brings it up to 600 degrees or whatever, and then that's fine, right? If you don't, so you do other things. But
It's not fine when it breaks your oven or paste off.
Oh my God, that happened to me to us.
really,
Yeah.
something with a self-clean cycle should...
It burned. No, it didn't break the oven. It broke the control board for the stove.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Ours broke
But
our oven
shouldn't it,
the
like-
day before it paced off.
They're made to do that.
It,
Okay,
yeah.
well, whatever.
Wow, that's so crazy. Yeah, day before it paced off, both of us.
Yeah, okay. You know. Now I remember one year the year my parents redid their kitchen, they just planned it so that it would be done right before Pesach, so for 1 year we wouldn't have to kosher everything. We just had new everything.
But how? How does that even work? Things never finish on time.
Right, so you just, you plan for a few weeks early and just say, we won't cook. We'll have no food. We'll go out for 2 weeks. It's just not worth the koshering. That's what we did. Okay. So that's the basic halacha of koshering. But then the Gemara continues. It says, So the Gemara says, wait a second. Here's the problem. The only type of taste that's going to create halachic problems is what's called notein tam l'shvach. If the taste that's embedded in the walls is going to contribute positively to the food into which it enters. We assume halachically that food has a positive taste while it's what's called ben yomo. How long is ben yomo? So it's a machloket. Some Rishonim say it means until nightfall, right? As long as you've gone through a night, so now it's fine. The halachically accepted position is 24 hours. And after 24 hours, then the taste that's in there, even if it would be emitted, is rancid and therefore is halachically insignificant. So he says, wait a second. If you hold that notin dam levgam, this rancid taste is permitted, why do you ever need to kosher anything? Meaning just wait 24 hours, let the taste become rancid, and that's it. So the Gemara says, Amar of Chia Berei Rav Huna lo asur Torah el kedera bat yoma delav notin dam levgamu. So answer one is,
They were only prohibited
it's
on the
yes, all the halachot of koshering are only
on the same
for the first, let's say, 24 hours. After that, you're right. So the Gemara says, Mikan ve'elech lishteri. So then why do you ever need to kosher? Just wait 24 hours. So the Gemara says, no. Gzeira shina bat yoma mishum kedera bat yoma. Rabbinically, we make you kosher because we're worried that otherwise you'll start using it within the 24-hour period. Okay.
So according to the Torah, you can technically use like anything for 24 hours, but the rabbinic laws are there to make sure that we don't use it during the 24 hours.
So that is the simplest understanding of this Gemara. Yes. Right? Now, there is a possibility that's not 100% true. And I'll say this argument outside. Okay? It could be that what the Gemara is saying is that if you don't use it within 24 hours, it won't make it not kosher, but that doesn't mean you don't have to kosher it lechatchila. Why would that be the case? So Rabbi Soloveitchik had the following argument. Basically, there is a machloket whether even tam l'shvach, even good taste, is actually biblically prohibited or not, or whether tam ki ikar is only derabanan. Now he said if it's derabanan, so then, right, according to the vision that all taste is only rabbinic, that the only thing that's not kosher is mamashut, right, is actual, the food, the substance of the food. So then, why should the Torah ever need koshering? So he said it might be that there's a second level, that koshering accomplishes two things. The Gemara here is talking about what koshering accomplishes in terms of what it sounds like, removing non-kosher taste. But the Gemara conceptually links it to tefillah, right? To immersing it, which has a positive mitzvah aspect to it. And it could be that koshering, even if it won't create halachic problems, something that once was used for non-kosher food, there might be a mitzvah element to kosher it, in addition. And that's how that position, who holds that Tom is never biblical, will say, but the pasuk totally says you need to kosher. So that's going to come back into the conversation soon. But this Gemara, right, is a classic place to start, because the simplest understanding is that the whole entire category of koshering is about taste. Right? Now, therefore, what would happen if you would have a vessel in which you knew that taste stayed and never left?
Then you could never...
You could never kosher it. What do we call that in halacha? So look at number 5. We call that clay, porcelain, right? Ceramic, right? China, right? The halacha is, very simply, they are not kosherable, right? Once non-kosher food has gone in, the assumption is it'll never come out. It is treif. You'll say, isn't it true you could leave it for 12 months, right? Yeah, what do you...
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
Oh, good. So the simplest understanding of this sugya is that it means le'olam, means forever. Ramosha Feinstein has a tshuva based on a tshuva by Rabbi Yaakov Menden that maybe when the Gemara says that it doesn't leave forever, it doesn't mean forever. It means it doesn't leave in the normal koshering process. But if you leave it for 12 months, right, that's like super letting the taste go rancid. And then there's a certain type of koshering you can do, which is called milav irui, where you dunk it 3 times over 3 days and 24 hours, right? 24 hours in between. And Ramosha Feinstein says that in a case when there's extreme financial loss, then he allows you to rely on this position of Yaakov Emden and say, and kosher it in that. But you're right? Not everyone accepts it, but fundamentally what the Gemara is saying is if taste doesn't leave, then it's either not kosher forever or it's much harder to get the taste out. Yeah.
This is kind of a weird question, but like, if a food fermented, would it be considered like rancid?
So it depends,
Like
right?
if you like had fermented cheese.
No, so if it has to be rancid, right? If the normal way of eating it is like that, right? That's not rancid, right? The Gemara goes through different things and says, right, this type of thing gives good taste. This type of thing gives bad taste, right?
Rancid isn't like...
No, it doesn't mean spoiled. It means, right, bad. It means bad, right? It means not like, maybe you could argue it's bad, but people eat it and people like the taste. It means like the taste is bad. Like no one would eat that, or normal people would not eat it, right?
Like moldy.
Well, not necessarily, because cheeses, you actually...
Oh, like moldy vegetables.
It has to be the type of thing that people don't eat. That's right. If rancid is bad, is we can just say bad, right? Bad taste, right? Bad with catch all.
Wait, so I have a question.
Yeah.
If, let's say we have like a mug like this, and you drink coffee in it, and it's hot, and then you want to drink tea later on when you like ate meat, would you be able to use it?
Good. So that's a different type of a question, right? The answer to that question, right, is not going to be the same as this question. Meaning, could you use the same mug that you use for your coffee for like a chicken soup? The answer is no, right? Do you have to wait between meat and something which was cooked in a dairy pot? The answer is also no, right? Like, if you cook pasta in a clean dairy pot, which has been used within 24 hours, right? You can't eat it with meat, but you can eat it after meat. It's dairy equipment, right? That's dairy equipment, right? That's fine, right? Meaning, you can't eat it together, but waiting is a different story. Waiting is itself only a derabanan, minhag, whatever, right? Depending on number of hours and things like that. And there, it's much more, so that you can do, right? That you can do. So this becomes now what happens if you had something on the opposite side? What if you had a vessel which never absorbed? So, you'll say, oh, stainless steel. But the truth is that in halacha, there was something that preceded stainless steel, which was? Glass. Thank you. Right? As you look at number 6, so there's a machloket about glass. The standard Sephardi position is, Klei zchuchit, afilu machnisan lekiyum, afilu mishtamish ben bechamin, right? The Bechaber's position, the Sephardi position is glass. Even if you used it with hot water, ein tzrichem shom hechsher sheinam bolim. The assumption was they are smooth, and therefore they don't absorb, and therefore the standard Sephardi position is you can use glass, mix and match for meat and milk. Doesn't matter. Ubishtifa b'al masakilu. You just got to make sure it's clean. You got to clean it between. The Rama is machmir. The yesh machmir and Rama declares chut afil ba'galolo manilu. Some people say glass is the opposite extreme. It is like cheres. It's like porcelain, and it's not kosherable ever. And that is the Ashkenazi minhag. It's not clear whether that's actually the Ashkenazi minhag in general or just the Ashkenazi minhag on Pesach, right? Because this is the Ramah in Hilchot Pesach. I don't want to get into glass at the moment. Glass is its own sugya. But what's the point from here? The point here is everyone agrees that if you would have a vessel that didn't absorb, it would not need koshering. They argue about whether glass absorbs. But everyone agrees that there are two extremes. There are vessels, right? That there are three types of vessels. Vessels which absorb and never let go of their taste. Vessels that cannot absorb, and vessels that can absorb, but you can also remove the taste from it, right? Vessels that will never get rid of their taste are not kosherable. Vessels that don't absorb don't need to be koshered, and vessels that absorb but can remove the taste, that's where the halachot of koshering were created. Right? That's what they're for. That is basically the three categories in halacha, which means, yeah.
Okay, if you ate a food that was made with non-kosher silverware, or at least non-mikvah silverware, would the food be not kosher?
Okay, so those are two different questions. Anything made with something that didn't go to the mikvah, it's fine, right? It doesn't create, doesn't create any kashrus problems whatsoever. You're not allowed to do it, right?
I went to a vegan restaurant.
What's the incentive?
So you know what? Maybe it's worth. Okay, tefillat kelim, the halacha is like this: anything that a Jew acquires from a non-Jew, he or she must tovel that kli. If you do not, and you cook with that pot, the food is still kosher. You violated that mitzvah, whatever it is, but it's kosher. That's clear. Let's say you go to a non-Jew's house, and a non-Jew takes their brand new pot and cooks
Carrots.
what?
Carrots.
Fine, carrots. Let's say carrots, which are things that are edible raw, so there's no problem with bishul akum. The non-Jew cooks it in his non-tovel pot. The halacha is no problem, because only once you acquire it, you need to tovel it. You're allowed lechatchila to use it. So, or to give you an even more extreme case, I loved this case. I was 3 or 4 years ago at a scholar in residence at Princeton, and I stayed. There was a visiting professor from Hebrew U. Normally, you know what the Advanced Institute is at Princeton? It's not technically part of Princeton. It was an advanced research institute that was created for Einstein. It's basically a academia kollel. They pay really smart people to come and just research for a year, and they don't let them do anything but research, and they provide all your needs. They give you an apartment, they give you like food stipends, they give you everything you need so that you can just focus on learning for the year. So most people who go to as you can imagine, to the Advanced Institute are like academics who maybe they're not married, maybe they're married with no kids, maybe they're married with one kid. So they have like an apartment building that the institute owns, and they just give you a nice apartment. That's it. This guy is a frum Jew from Yerushalayim who happens to be a super genius professor of theoretical mathematics. So, but he has 6 kids, and like Princeton panicked. Like, what do we do? But Princeton happens to own a lot of property, so they gave him this 8-bedroom house with 3 living rooms, and it was amazing. So we stayed there because he had plenty of room, and literally they're if you say we're having guests, then housekeeping brings you 20 cots. They're how many do you need? And they just bring it to your house. They do the laundry, bring it back. It was amazing. But he told me, he said it was for Sukkot, whatever. But he said the best part was that the halacha is, and this is where it comes to it, is that by tefillat kelim, you only need to put something in a mikvah once you own it. But if it's a new vessel owned by a non-Jew, and you're just borrowing it, you don't need to tovel it. So he said, because he keeps kosher, the Institute bought him an entire kitchen of pots and pans, brand new, and just left it there. But he said, I don't own it. The Institute keeps it when he leaves. He's just borrowing it. And therefore, he got off the plane. He didn't have to tovel it. He just, right? It doesn't matter. If it's owned by a non-Jew, you can do whatever you want. Right? You can do whatever you want. You can use it. It's fine. Right? Tefillah is very specifically once it moves from the non-Jew's property to yours. So tefillah is not the problem. Now, what about koshering? So, if it's clean and it hasn't been used in 24 hours, you shouldn't have done it, but it's kosher, right? You have a spoon that was used 24 hours ago for pig, right? But it's clean, and you accidentally put it in your soup. It's fine. Totally fine, right? Yeah.
You shouldn't have done it, but it's kosher. That's like, what's the incentive to do it if it remains kosher no matter what? Like that's like
No, like you're not supposed to do it, right?
But why? Well, so what if you do it? 'Cause
So we'll get to it. There is a halacha of ein mevatel nisur lechatchila, right? If you do it knowing it'll be fine, then it might not be fine, right? Post fact, right? If you do it ab initio, it might not be fine. But post facto, it's going to be fine, right? So if the non-Jew bought a new pot for you to cook the carrots, right, but didn't realize that they needed kosher spoons, and they used, I don't know what they're doing with these carrots, but whatever ththey mixed it fine. I don't know. Okay, it would be fine. Same halacha.
Wait, what you said? Okay, if you use the spoon for, like,
24 hours ago, if 24 hours has passed, so you can't use it, right? You can't use it lechatchila. But if it was used, you used it by accident, the non-Jew used it, didn't realize, whatever, it's fine, right? The food stays kosher as long as it's been 24 hours past.
It was like meat
Yeah, exactly. It's the same. There are some distinctions, but at this point, it's not. Yeah.
So it's fine to eat at a vegan restaurant if you don't have anything with wine.
Okay, so vegan restaurants are a bit tricky because there are complicated things that happen in vegan restaurants, right? So
Like wine.
wine is complicated, right? And vinegar is complicated, and obviously, right?
The dessert things.
What?
Let's say it's just the
So look. So there are very quickly the problems with vegan restaurants that you're going to face are obviously wine and vinegar and things like that, and potentially any fruit that are imported from Israel could be a problem, right? Because if it's not true in a maestro, that
yeah, but it's not gonna happen.
no, actually sometimes it does. But anyways,
Really?
it can. You do have to make sure of things like that. The more serious problems are obviously anything which is not edible raw, right? Is a problem of bishul akum, and we paskin. The machlokas and Shulchan Aruch, Rashba and the Ra, but we paskin that if a non-Jew cooks the food, not only is the food not kosher, dirabanan, but the pots are not kosher, so that creates problems. What?
So you can have pasta.
Correct,
Or
probably.
bread.
Well, no, so bread's a bit different, right? Bread's different because bread is baked and bishul akum doesn't apply in the same way. Pas akum is different. Like in Europe,
Baked things are okay, but not cooked like on the stove.
correct. Baked, the halacha is, the standard halacha is that a baked food which is cooked by a non-Jew in the privacy of his own home is not kosher, right? But commercially produced baked goods don't have that problem. So like in Europe,
If they made like cakes and stuff, would you be able to eat it?
I mean, potentially, yes. Meaning, look, in Europe, it's standard to go to a bakery. In certain different countries in Europe, depending on which ones use lard and which ones don't. But in the countries where they don't use lard in their ovens, it's standard for people to buy bread from non-kosher bakeries.
You can eat bread that doesn't have extra on it in Europe.
It depends on the country.
Like, let's say.
I don't know which country. People ask me which countries. I don't know. I have a friend who's the chief rabbi of Bern, right? Capital of Switzerland. And so, like, when I have questions about that, I ask him, and he, like, people in Europe know this. Certain countries you can, certain countries you can't. I don't know which ones. I have like two friends who are from Europe who were telling me this. One is now a rabbi in Australia. One's a rabbi in Bern. So when I have questions, I just ask them. Well, one of them is a Mervis. I assume he has access to all this. Now, my brother-in-law to be his brother. Whatever. I asked my brother-in-law. Yeah. Oh, by the way, the other thing is that some vegan restaurants are actually avodah zarah, so you have to be careful.
Wait. What? Can you go back to that one?
Oh yeah. So one of my friends said he got a shaila. Someone asked him about a vegan restaurant and sent him the link to the vegan restaurant. It's in the heart of London, and it actually says that before they serve any of the food, the entire vegan restaurant is dedicated to one of the Hindu gods, and that they actually do like libations and stuff. So it's straight up avodah zarah. So that's apparently a thing again. So he's like, no, this is actually usher. Like you can't go there. So I didn't know that was a thing, but he.
Ask if they're like Hinduist or Buddhist before I walk in.
Yeah, but like it actually said that this restaurant, again, this is not India, this was London, is dedicated to the god whatever, and we bless and sanctify our food before we serve it. And I'm like, okay, that is, I don't even have to, this is everything that Chazal were worried about was like manifest in this restaurant. It says so on their website in big letters. It is, because everyone always says, oh, I don't have to worry about idolatry. The answer is, apparently sometimes you do. Who knew? Yeah.
Wait, so what's... There are some Jews in
modern Orthodox communities who will eat out dairy.
Yeah, that's a real problem.
So like what?
Right, vegan, you have to, like, vegan is potentially okay, but I want to be very careful how I say this. I would not usually suggest it because you really have to deal with a lot of halachic issues. Like, you have to deal with all of them, but theoretically, right, there are certain types of vegan restaurants where you could solve the problems. There's also, by the way, the bugs problem, right? Bugs, like bugs in vegetables and things like that, right? But theoretically, there are places in which you could solve this, okay? Right? Depending on what vegetables you're talking about, how they clean it, I don't know, biotic vegan, right? I had a friend once who was a biotic vegan, right? So, like, what? I think that's what they called it. That he didn't eat anything that had been cooked at a temperature above like 105 degrees, which is not halakhically significant. Like, he only had raw food. Like, he literally lived on bananas and almonds. Not roasted almonds, just almonds. What? I don't know. He thought it was healthy. And then when he went to yeshiva, like, they beat it out of him or something. I don't know. He went to like a somewhat Haredi yeshiva, and they're like, this is just not happening. This is just not happening. So, like, sure, there are certain places which are like, you're not going to have bishul akum problem because, like, they're biotic vegan and everything is cold, and it's just a question of how do we, like, take raw almonds and bananas and make them taste like something. Okay, fine. Like, you can come up with a case in which it might really not be a problem if there's no wine and no wine and no vinegar and no, etc.
Sun hit it too hard.
Yeah, I don't know, whatever. Like, you could come up with something. Like, you could have a fruit salad. Dairy is not like that. Dairy is much more problematic, right? Because cheese is problematic, right? Cheese needs to be gvinat akum, right? It can't be gvinat akum, right? Milk, we have certain kulot which we don't for cheese. Yeah, so that's another derabbanan, that cheese has to be produced by Jews.
Isn't that just Chalav Yisrael?
No, so milk is different. Milk is less strict than cheese. Cheese is a problem because traditionally rennet was made from animals, right?
But what if now, with all like the FDA regulations, that American cheese is not?
Good. So there were halachic authorities who thought that was okay, but the majority of poskim did not. The consensus opinion is that when it comes to cheese, they're more problematic than dairy than milk. What? It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Again, the majority. There were dissenting voices, right? Like, traditionally, right? One of the kashrut organizations where this is the number one reason that people don't trust most people don't trust the kashrut organization is because of the position they took on this issue. Again, like, the people who run the kashrut organization are like halachic Jews. They just their halachic position is that, from what I gather, that cheese does not need a hechsher, essentially, which 95% of poskim reject. Tablet K, that was for a long time. That was. I don't know what else they do.
If the cheese is kosher, then there's no problem. If it has a kosher, like an OU.
Right. But again, a lot of these places, usually these places do not have kosher cheeses. Right, dairy. Look, there are other problems that people think, I can go at dairy, except they don't realize that it's totally standard in non-kosher pizza places to put lard on the pizza to give it a richer taste. Like, this is just the reality. Like, they think it's right that you didn't ask, and right, they put pig fat on it. Like, and there are serious problems on these things, right? Milk and meat, and then Plus, I'm having pizza, but it's a place where they have pepperoni on the pizzas, and then the pots and the pans and the ovens, right? And is it right? Dairy, pretty much no. It is a serious problem. Vegan, we can have a conversation. We can have a conversation about vegan.
It's vegetarian.
Vegetarian, again, is going to have problems because vegetarian is, right? Standardly, vegetarian includes vegetarians will eat milk and eggs.
Right.
Right, and then dairy is the same. Right, that's what I'm saying. Dairy is the same problem. So dairy is a real serious issue. It's really hard to justify that. I don't have any way to justify it. Vegan, we can have a conversation depending on the vegan restaurant and depending on whether it's how the cooking is being done and what you're eating and things like that. Certain vegan restaurants might really be fine. There are more issues than people realize, right? But they're not necessarily insurmountable, right? Again, it depends. Like I said, you might not know. In the case that my friend had, right, there was a non-starter. It was actually an idolatrous temple. Okay, these things happen. Okay, I don't know how often they happen, but it was London, so that shook my confidence in saying that you're not worrying about Avodah Zarah. So now I can no longer say that. Okay. Look at number 4. Other halachot that are based on this taste issue. So here's again, there are many halachot I could have picked, but here's a classic one, right? Beitzah shenit bashla b'mayim b'kdeira cholevet. I think this was the one we mentioned before. An egg is cooked in a dairy pot. Mutar laterot b'tocha tarnagolet afilu lechatchila. So you can put it in. You can have it with chicken, even lechatchila, according to Mechaber. Aval nit bashla b'kdeira im basar. But it was cooked with meat, afil b'klipa, even in its shell. Asur lachla b'kutach. You can't eat it in this sort of yogurt cream thing. Ramah says v'yesh machmir and bitzliya uvishel asur notin tam bar notin tam. So this is the halacha what's called not bar not. Yeah. What if something is secondary taste? And here Sfardim are much more mekel, Ashkenazim are much more machmir, right? Which is secondary taste, right? Something that went into, etc. Again, we could have. Let's continue. Minhag la'asur lechatchila, or the Ashkenazi minhag is lechatchila to be machmir, not bar not. On secondary taste, but post facto it's fine. This is to eat it with milk and meat itself. But something which is not barnat, right, which is secondary taste. And now the question is not, can I eat it with milk, right? Can I cook it in a dairy pot? So that's fine. And what if it wasn't cooked? It was just put on a dairy plate or fleishik plate. Then you can even eat it with dairy. And if the taste has gone rancid, because it's not 24 hours. Now all these are very complicated in all of them, but the general rule, as it becomes evident from not bar not and Eino ben Yom and all that, is that taste is what matters in it. Now, how do you figure out how much taste is problematic? So the general rule is, right, 60. Right, I gave you just one example of that in 7. Right, that hatochiv kaf cholev. If you take a dairy spoon that's been used within 24 hours and you put it b'kdeira shel basar evcha, misharim kol ma shenichtav mimenu b'kdeira. So you assess, right? You figure out. These math is somewhat, hard, but you basically assess how much, right? How much taste has gone in, has it gone and emitted, and then figure out whether it's 60 times, and that's the rule, right? That's how you figure it out. Yeah.
How do you know that no taste is?
Good. So now let's, right, this is all the background, right? The background is basically this, right? Is that the rules of Kashrut are based on taste. All these problems of, I accidentally used the wrong spoon, this and, right? All of that is about taste. What happens, we know that there's a category in halacha of things that don't absorb taste. Traditionally, that was limited to glass for Sfardim. What do we do when we know, scientifically, that basically our pots and pans, our stainless steel pots and pans, are like glass of the mechaber? Right? That's the halachic question. Right? Is that the type of materials that in the Gemara would be discussed as things which absorb, now don't absorb. Right? That's really that's the question, right? With all that background. That's the question. What do you do? Okay. So.
Plastic.
What?
Plastic.
Standardly, you can kosher it. That's the assumption.
So, I could use this.
What?
I could use this.
You can kosher it. No, you have to kosher it. It does absorb, but you can kosher it.
Got it.
Though that probably doesn't need koshering, because that was probably only used for cold, right? Like a cereal bowl is cold, so you just have to clean it, and that's it. Oh, so if you use it in the microwave, then no. Then you have to... Okay. So what do you do? Right, so what do you do? So, right, methodologically speaking, what are our options? Right, what are our options? What do we do? Right, what do we do with the entire assumption of... Right, what do we do? We basically have 3 options. What are the 3 options that we have? What? No. I mean, now that we know that this is not the case, as a posek, what options do we have in front of us? How do we assess halacha? Right, now that we know that the basic physical assumptions that the halacha is based on are not relevant to the vessels that we have. So what are
Permit everything.
what?
Permit everything.
So one option is permit everything, right? Just say, look, the rule is taste. Their metal absorbed because it wasn't as good quality, it wasn't whatever. Does absorption mean that it went into the metal, into the molecules, or does it mean that there were holes and it got embedded, right? We can argue what it originally meant, right? But it's not true of our kalim, and therefore nowadays basically don't cook meat and milk together, but stainless steel, right? Don't use the same cast iron pot for milk and meat. Don't use the same clay for milk and meat. But stainless steel, just make sure it's clean. That's one extreme. Good. What's the other extreme?
Separate everything, meat and milk.
Correct. The other option is nothing has ever changed. And you can say this in different ways, which are ignore reality. Or reality doesn't matter. Right? This is formal halachic statement that there is taste. You don't see it scientifically, too bad. Or when Mashiach comes, we'll be able to change the halacha. But right now, we have to treat it as if there's still taste.
No.
Right? Some version of that. Right? That's model 2. Model 3 is
Somewhere in the middle?
somewhere in the middle, which is there are certain halacha that are based on taste, and those will change. But not every halacha that might be based on taste is based on taste. So it depends on the halacha. So maybe we'll distinguish between lechatchila and b'diavad, right? So somewhere in the middle, right? Those are broadly speaking the 3 models that we're going to take. Okay, so first question: are we allowed to even take this scientific evidence into account, or this not even scientific, right? This go home, test it yourself evidence, right? Are we allowed to do that? So you look at number 10. This is from the Radbaz. This is not modern. The Radbaz is often brought as a proof that, you're allowed to do these types of experiments. Because he says, right? He had some case where he tested it. He says, he tells this whole experiment that I had a certain material, so I tested it, right? I took a piece and I put it into the fire. Whatever his experiment is not the point, but poskim will want to say, look, you can experiment and then change the halacha accordingly. Look at the Radbaz and say, look, he did experiments, we do experiments, right? And he determined the halacha based on his experiments. If there's no taste going in, so then it's fine.
Do we hold
Right.
by him though on anything?
Yeah, the Radbaz is a very important posek. This is not like a random posek.
Okay, because if he did this experiment and we don't hold by him, then
Oh, I don't even know what this material is that he's talking about. But their point is that you see that he cared about experimentation. He thought that was a legitimate model. So poskim will want to be maker will go and say, look, the Radbaz did it. Why can't we? Other poskim, like we said. So let's go through what. So when this article came out, right? This was the responses. And again, this is where you're going to see methodologically speaking the way poskim think about these things. So 11, Rishon Zalman Auerbach. Aval inyan klalo dinagala chalila lechashev imzel levi road einenu sugei kelim arigim bliot pleito. He said that which you say that we don't see absorption. God forbid that we're changing the halacha. Ki einanu bekin be'agdara bliot pleita. You think you experimented? We're not experts in this, right? Experiments, they're just not good enough. They're just not good enough. V'lachein din kol kelim kachol mevuar b'dinei agalat kelim. And therefore the halacha has not changed, and then he hedges a little bit. But if there's extreme monetary loss, ask a rabbi. Meaning, fundamentally the halacha shouldn't change, but I'm aware enough that maybe it should change, that if there was a real loss, I'd bring it in. By the way, I did once give a share like this, and a food scientist emailed me and claimed that no, taste really does go in. That may be true, but I don't think it's halakhically significant taste. I mean, maybe not something you can taste. I mean, maybe scientifically. Anyways, so one model is to say, look, basically reject it. Keep it in the back of your mind if you really need to pull it out in an emergency. But fundamentally, halakha doesn't change. Just assume that your experiments are not good enough. Number 12. He said, Shamati. Sheyesh Mariara Mitzarfin Ladina and Mashak Der Vakilim Shalanu Lo'olam Lo Nadim Dam B'Tavshel. I heard that there are certain poskim who want to include, in terms of their arguments of why something should be lenient, the fact that our pots don't absorb. Umatin Chainu Midrash B'Shem Agoner Shrevazaman Arbach Zatzal Sheismil Zazet Ot Sudden Lakal. They say that's what Rav Shlomo Zalman had said, that don't usually apply in it, but if there's other reasons to be makel, you can, right, to be lenient, then you can bring it into it. Right, so there is this testimony that Rav Shlomo Zalman, what he hinted at in 11, he actually did, which is reject it 90% of the time, but keep it in the back of your mind as another reason to be makil when there's an emergency. Okay? 13. Now, I'll say, by the way, Rav Shechter, when I've heard him talk about it, basically says, yeah, it doesn't absorb. When Mashiach comes, we'll change the halacha, but right now we're stuck in it because of formality, and in general, there's certain staying power to the formal rules of Chazal. That's basically his position. Okay? That would be, again, a position that most of the time it doesn't change, maybe it never changes, maybe pull it out in an emergency, but fundamentally, keep it as is. 13, Rav Yaakov Ariel. Hamada yochal lazor lanu lagdir avdel al smach hagdarot madayot. V'chein yadua shetzipuy hachomer zchuchei gvoha ma'od. He said, science is helpful and can be used in halacha. Ulam. Lo al smach hamada kavanu zor el achusha TV. Hamada rak mesei lanu lagdir hagdarot nechono. But he said, to be fair, for the purposes of halacha, we don't need the science, it's just, what do you naturally taste? He says there are two poles. There are things which absorb and never give up taste, which is porcelain, and things that never absorb, which is glass, according to many. And he said, but based on this, Chazal set up rules based on what they saw about metal and glass and porcelain. But you can't now let people figure it out themselves. He said, look, if we said the rule isn't metal kosher, glass is fine, porcelain is not, and we said, figure out whether the pot that you have absorbs taste, well, tomorrow they'll come up with a new type of material, and, who knows what will happen? It'll be too confusing. So he says, can't be that every type of vessel has a different definition. He said, look, don't change the halacha. You know why? Chazal did their science, they came up with formal rules, and we just can't have complete halachic chaos. Right? We can't have that people, instead of asking their rabbi, will try to taste from their pot. Okay? So, why would you say, you know what, halacha doesn't change? Either because you think it's not really based on science, or you think we're formally stuck until Mashiach comes, or because of policy grounds, that things are just going to be chaos.
So we say, we don't want people to taste from their products because we don't want people to have to do that every single time they want to see if it's kosher.
Right, or you just can't make halacha that way.
You're saying, no halachic anarchy.
What?
No halachic anarchy.
Yeah, basically, right? Now, at the other extreme, you could just say, no, the science changes and that's it. We know the reality was all based on taste, no big deal. The middle position would be, so let's skip for a moment to 17, right? So basically 17 and on is my translation broken up into paragraphs of Rav Melamed. So Rav Melamed is a good example of someone who lays out the problem. Okay, so let's read it. We'll read through it in English. Okay, he writes as follows. Some say that even though it has become clear that our metal does not absorb or spit out taste, we cannot change the tradition, either because we can't rely on the research of our senses, for what has been established as halacha has turned into a permanent law that is not dependent on reality, or because nullifying the laws that have kept for generations will damage the keeping of halacha, right? All types of things like this. However, it seems more likely that, in fact, the basis for the reason of koshering vessels has been nullified. Custom does not have the power to sustain this law in full force for generations. In fact, some claim that since metal vessels not absorb, there's no need to kosher between meat and milk, chametz and pesach treif and kosher. He said, I don't think that's right? That we don't change anything. And he said, you could therefore go to the opposite extreme and say, forget it all. Right? You must just clean them well, just as there are those who are lenient with glass vessels to treat them as vessels which neither absorb nor spit out. Treat all of our vessels the way Svardim treat glass. End. Done. Right? That would be the other extreme. But he says, I want to stake out a middle position. And even though the logic of those who would be lenient is strong, and if most poskim would agree, I would accept their position. He said, look, if the whole world came and said, you know what, we're just going to rewrite Hilchot Kashrut, I would say, I get it, that makes sense. And it seems that practically, even that it has become clear that the absorption of metal and glass vessels is negligible, to the point where it is impossible to taste the absorbed taste, still if treif was cooked in them, there would be an obligation to kosher them, either through agala or libun. Also, it's obligatory to designate separate vessels for milk and meat. And one cannot transfer a meat vessel to dairy or vice versa without a galor libon. And we will enumerate 3 reasons. But he says, I don't think that the extremes are right. And let me explain to you why. I think that you should still have separate dishes. He said for 3 reasons. 1, the first principle. We find the sages instituted many decrees to cause separation between meat and milk and prevent mistakes. Thus, they forbade eating milk and meat together, which is not deraisa. Deraisa is only if they're cooked together. Right? Biblically, it's only if they're cooked together, but we don't eat milk together. We forbade cooking dairy or meat bread to eat at the table with other kinds of food. Right? One can say that based on these decrees, it is obligatory not to use the same vessels for meat and milk, even if they're normally cleaned, as there is concern that sometimes they will not be cleaned as well, and it will come to the mixing of meat and milk. For this reason, one cannot use vessels that were used to cook treif for kosher food, for if he gets used to this, he may use them even when they're not sufficiently clean. However, based on this, it could be that only ab initio one must be strict about separation, but after the fact, there would be no obligation to do agal or libon on a vessel used to cook treif. So argument 1 is, in general, we're very careful about kashrus and milk and meat, because we know that if we tell people, have the same pot for milk and meat, but make sure it's 100% clean, what will happen?
It will eventually get to the point.
They'll end up cooking it with it dirty. So he said, so I'm not going to tell you to use the same pot, but because in general we set up safeguards. But he says, if that's the case, this is only a lechatchila halacha, right? This is ab initio, meaning don't do it. But if you did it, what would the halacha be? Totally fine. So that's argument 1 for a middle position, right? A don't do this lechatchila, but if it ever happens, it's fine. And that is, we like separating between milk and meat to prevent real problems. Argument 2, the second principle. Since the precise studies show that any cooking there is some minimal absorption, although it is impossible to sense the taste, it is forbidden to nullify it in the dish because it's forbidden to actively nullify prohibition. Ein mevatlen isur lechatchila. It is therefore imperative to kasher the vessels to remove that minimal absorption. According to many Rishonim, the rule is biblical. A second principle is as follows. Halachically, there's a principle called ein mevatlen isur lechatchila, which means that, yes, if I dropped a little bit of milk into my cholent and it was less than 1/60th, it would be kosher. But you're not allowed to do that. Right? You're not allowed to rely on that lechatchila. And according to certain Rishonim, that's biblically prohibited, and if you do it on purpose, then you can't benefit from it. So he says rule 2 is, no one says that there's no absorption at all. They say that there's not enough absorption that you can taste it. So he says principle 2 is, you should kosher because if you don't kosher, there's not enough taste to make a problem. But since we know that there is something there, 1,000th of a particle, 1,000,000th of a particle, in the end of the day, when you use it without koshering, perhaps we can conceptualize this as you are actively relying on the rules of nullification, which you don't do actively. So again, that's another reason to say you should kosher, but if you don't, post facto, it would be fine. Third argument, and this comes back to the koshering. He said the third principle, it's possible from the Torah that any vessel used to cook treif, whether it absorbed taste or not, must be koshered in the way the treif was cooked, without galor or libon, as per the simple read of the verse. All things that came in fire. Right? This is what I said at the beginning from Ray Soloveitchik, which is that maybe koshering has 2 roles. One is to remove non-kosher things. The other is there's a ritual component to koshering non-kosher dishes. And he said that which the sages said about absorbed taste was only relevant for the food that was cooked in it. He said that when the Chazal talk about koshering to prevent food from becoming non-kosher, that was half the story. But the obligation to kosher always stands. And he says the proof is from those Rishonim who rule that taste is like the food itself, meaning tam ki ikar, is only rabbinic. Meaning that biblically, even taste, which can be sensed, is nullified in a majority. If so, why did the Torah command koshering vessels that a treif cooked in them? It must be a biblical law. Thus, even if one cannot sense the taste, there may be an obligation to kosher by biblical law. Even though the flow of the unit implies that koshering is only for the taste of the food, there is support to this principle that it's just a biblical law. Right? So, argument 3 is, even though the Gemara that we saw in Avodah Zarah seems to say that the only reason to kosher is to remove non-kosher taste, there may also be a ritual component. And therefore, his 3 arguments are because we like separating to prevent problems. because there might be a ritual reason to kosher in addition to the issue of simply removing non-kosherness, and the fact that there is some infinitesimal taste, and if you don't kosher, then you are actively relying on nullification principles, he says. So I'm not willing to throw out the halachot of koshering. But, on the other hand, I'm not willing to say that post facto will cause a problem because you have to realize that the science points in the direction there is no taste. Furthermore, he says, there's another important and fundamental reason which arose while fleshing out the issues with engineers and chemists who helped in our study in the community and yeshiva, as well as experts who wrote responses to the question I asked in an article a month ago. Even in the past, the metal itself did not absorb taste. He said there's another reason that I would think you have to kosher, and that is that metal never absorbed. And yet the Torah said you have to kosher, and God can't be wrong. Right? Chazal might have misunderstood, but God can't be wrong. So he said it could be, you could say metal making has improved over the years, but that's probably not true. He said what he says is maybe it never really meant absorption in. It meant things that were stuck in nooks and crannies, or it meant some thin film that is still evident there, right? Maybe that's what it was talking about to begin with, and if that's the case, then fundamentally the laws of kashrus would still apply. Skip to the last paragraph. He said there's enough, but in that sense, there's still something, even if that was true, even if the reason that you had to kosher was because of thin film that were left, there's a different different reality that would point in the direction that halacha should change, and that is soap. Right? I mean, there's two questions. One is stainless steel. The other is that if koshering, the problem used to be that you couldn't really get all the food out, so things were stuck. Increases in what? Soap and dishwashers and things like that, right, would remove that secondary problem. That's what he says in the last paragraph. Just skip to the very last line. There, his conclusion is, if our words are correct, then the biblical mitzvah to kosher vessels that are cooked with treif remains in force. However, if post facto food was cooked accidentally in a treif pot even within the day, or milk was cooked in a meat pot within the day, if the pot has been totally clean, since it's clear to us the taste is not sent to the food is kosher. Right? So this is essentially, right, he lays out for you the three positions. He said, there are those who think it doesn't change at all. You could argue that it totally changes, it just is about taste, and if there is no taste, it's no problem at all. But the middle position would be to say, because there's a ritual component to koshering, because things aren't always clear, and really not telling people to have one set of dishes is going to lead to real problems. Because we don't rely on nullification ab initio, so therefore you should still koshering. Koshering is still a halacha. But the question of post facto, what happened when I accidentally cooked with the wrong pot, all those halachot are really about taste. And since the taste, we know it's different, so it's just mutter. Right? It's just mutter. Right? Those are the three models that he sets up, and he prefers number 3. Though as we've seen, now let's go back to the other, now that we've sort of sketched out the summary, now let's go and just see some more positions here. So we saw that Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and I quoted from Rav Shechter and Rav Yaakov Ariel, basically take variations of the Machmir approach. It'll cause halachic chaos, we can't change halacha till Mashiach comes, we don't rely on scientific studies. If you look at 14, Reb Nachum Rabinovich, who's the Rosh Yeshiva at Yeshivat Ma'aleh Adumim, he also takes a middle position. He says, Biram, yesh l'chalek be'shimush l'chatchila shimush ti'avad. He says, I think the middle position is correct. There's a difference between ab initio and post facto. He said, I think that the reason that Ashkenazim are strict about glass, even though they knew, just like Sfardim knew, that glass doesn't absorb, same as Ramalamud, which is very good, but people don't clean their dishes so well. They just don't. Right? Some people do, but most people don't. Right? Or many people. I don't know. Okay, I can't say. Definitely many people, right? I have seen people who don't clean so well, right? Especially, right? You cook pasta, it's very easy. You rinse the pot, it's clean. You make a stew, you make a cholent, right? You work on it for a while, right? And like something's burnt in, and like it's like certain things. It's just hard. So he says, he said, and if you let them use the same dishes, they'll end up doing that with things where it's really problematic, like porcelain, right, or whatever. ומנוסף, ישחש אנשים יטו ויחשבו שרוב הכלים לא בולים ומשתמשים בהם גם לבשר וגם לחלב, ניתן לשטוף אותם יחד, ונמצא שאם יש עליהם שארי בשר וחלב, כגון כאשר אנשים מכניסים לניחי כלים וכדומה, היו עלולים לבוא לידי בישול בשר וחלב. And he said, and if you start this, people will think that you can wash them all together even without cleaning them, and that's a problem because there's actual pieces of meat and milk, right? And this is a very complicated sugya in general about dishwashers, but certain dishwashers first do a round with just water, and then they do a round with soap. Certain do a round with soap first. If you do it with a round without soap, so then if there's food on it, yes, you're not eating it, but it's still the biblical prohibition of cooking milk and meat. So he says, right, once you get in the habit of mixing everything, right, God knows where that's going to lead. Yeah. Okay, so this is a big machloket, but his argument, right? His argument is that if you start, once you break down the things, right, totally, so then people will end up cooking it together. So in general, the standard psak in America is that you have to have separate dishwashers. In Israel, it's much more standard to Rav Moshe Feinstein and Rav Ovadia Yosef both thought that you don't need separate dishwashers, right? Definitely in consecutive runs, and Rav Ovadia isn't sure that maybe even in concurrent runs you could have milk and meat in it, especially if you threw soap on it. So in America, the standard psak, as I gather, is that people don't use the same dishwasher. In Israel, it's much more common for people to have one dishwasher. It really depends. Like on my dishwasher, what I noticed at some point is that the delicates cycle is on 45 degrees Celsius, which actually means that according to all positions, I could use it consecutively because that's not Yatzaledetbo. Right? That's under the minimum opinion, according to anybody, at which it would be halachically considered cooking, and therefore you can actually use my dishwasher consecutively. What?
You're not eating anything that goes through the drink.
So it doesn't matter. That's what he pointed out. Cooking is problematic in general.
If you're not going to eat it.
Correct.
What if you rinse
Correct.
let's say
Good. So right. So then you could rinse the plates, or you can throw soap. Right. If you have a dishwasher which only does water, right, and then does soap, so you throw soap in, and then there'll be no round without soap. Right. Again, dishwasher is a complicated question. But like I said, in America, the standard psak is that people were really machmir. Meaning Ad Kedei Chach, where Moshe Feinstein is lenient, but I asked someone to ask his family, and his family is not lenient. Right, like his daughter-in-law was horrified at the thought that anyone had ever been lenient, like your father-in-law was lenient. No one does that. It happens to be that the dishwasher he was talking about was a bit different. I've seen it. It's like an industrial size. It's not the original Shiloh was about a dishwasher in Toronto in Baycrest, which is a kosher hospital. The thing is like $150,000, and it's the size of a room, and it's like very different type of dishwasher, but not the point. But again, in Israel, it is much more common for people to have one dishwasher. Again, how exactly they say it? Do you have to rinse it off? How much do you have to rinse off? Do you have to throw soap in? Variations on that. Okay. So therefore, Rabinovich, like Rav Melamed, comes up with his middle position. He said, look, there's all these policy reasons, right, and potential halachic mess-ups that tell me, don't do this ab initio. But he says, "Lefichach, sheyesh chashiva gdola b'veirur elo kelim bolim ve'elo lo bolim. Yesh chalek ben lechatchila ben devayav." He said, "Look, it's important scientifically to figure out what actually absorbs, but for post facto questions, b'kelim kegon elu she'atem badaktem she'enim bolim. If you these things that you check that don't absorb, lechatchila and l'shtamish boto kelim gam levazar v'gam lechalav. Don't use the same dish, stainless steel, whatever, for meat and milk." For all the concerns that I have, mi'idach, on the other hand, b'di'avadim b'shlu b'kli basar naki, b'sari naki, kazeh chalav alev v'chatav shil mutar v'tzarech l'shar b'shishim. But post facto, I don't think you need to worry about 60. It's just permitted. B'frat davar zeh yachol liot chashuv me'od b'mosdot kagon batei cholim. And he says this psak is particularly important in institutions like hospitals, malonot, baseit savash, mashlim kamelot gdolot, mishtamshim bekelim rabim, b'diavad lo rak atavshil mutar, la gam kli kazeh shebishlu bo hen zakuk lagala gam ki im lenikui tov. So he said, therefore, right here, you can't just say, right, to a private person, you can say, try to kosher things. L'chatchila, if you don't, it's not a big deal. But he said, institutions, right, their very reality is a b'diavad reality. Because we have a rule in Psah called Sharat Chak, Ki b'diavad. I mean, anytime something is particularly extenuating circumstances, we treat it as post facto, even ab initio. Meaning we allow you to rely on post facto leniencies even though you haven't done it yet. So he says in institutions, he would say, you only have to clean. Clean it really, really well, but on those materials, like you have a big, huge industrial-sized oven, and it's made of something that doesn't absorb, clean it, and you're fine. Rav Dov Lior in 15. Lachein. Im yitbarer lechalutin shematechet mesuyemet bliata muetet kol kach ad she'ein ba kedei latet tam. If you would discover that certain type of metal has such little absorption that there's no taste, mutar gam ladara Torah cholek al something b'bliya muetet b'kli shedorol muetet. Right, so it would be permitted according to everyone. But he says, "Nachonu sheyish tami l'shkol et hashlachot shekol psika." But again, he says there are policy concerns. Gav davar shemutar mitzad adin, even if it's permitted. Kemo shemevi marana mechaber shein larot l'rabim davar tamua shenireh ki'ilu etir leisur. He said, I have another policy concern, which is there's a prohibition against permitting something to people that they think is usur, because if you do that without any concern, what will that do sometimes? It'll just weaken their concern, right, for halacha, because, right, I've always treated this as usur. This is what I did because my parents did it, my grandparents did it, and then you come and say, big deal, right? Even if you're right, a certain cavalier attitude towards things that people were machmir on is dangerous. And therefore he says, I'm not sure I would, even if it's technically mutter, he said, again, there are policy concerns. Shim chacham min hamek u'mochiach mitok divrei poskim shadavar mutar yachol orod kach. So he said, I'm not saying you're never allowed to do it, but it's at least a concern. He said, therefore, I'm willing to be lenient if other people sign on with me. He said, you could go into other metals. I don't want you to start researching now. Right, he said, my suggestion would be, take it a step at a time. Don't rush into anything. But fundamentally, you're right. Right? Fundamentally, you're right. If other people sign on it, I'm willing. But last position, Rav Asher Weiss, and then we'll sort of recap. I've read what you wrote, that scientifically our metals don't absorb. והשאלה אם יש משקל במחקר זה לגבי דיני הכשר כלים, כי אם נקבל את מסקנות המחקר המדעי בהכרח ישתנו הלכות אלה. Do we change the halacha? Because if you accept the science, halacha should change. Va'an b'kitzur. Let me answer quickly. Ro'eh ani sakana gdola b'nisayon l'shanot halacha misura midor l'dor al pi mechkar madai. I find it to be very dangerous to try to change tradition based on science. Yisodot halacha nikbu al yedei Chazal b'alei Mishnah v'Talmud. The principles of halacha were established by the members of Chazal in the Mishnah and the Gemara. Mehem yateid umehem pina dvarim yisod tarsh v'alpeh. Right, this is the foundations of the oral law. Me'olam lo nisu gdolei ador levdok acharei divreihem lekaimanu la'africhan elkimu v'kiblu divreihem k'divrei Moshe mipi hagvura. No one ever tried to go back and research and challenge. They accepted it as tradition. If you start re-examining everything that Chazal said based on science, you're going to make the entire Torah change and collapse. He said it's true. It's true that sometimes poskim cared about medical fact and scientific fact. That's only when you're dealing with local doubts. No one ever said, let's look at science and overthrow the principles of halacha. Hayachid mibein gdolei kadmonenu sharach mivchan madai u'maasi levarer midat habliya shel kelim alo radbaz. The one exception was the Radbaz, he only did it with one type of porcelain, because he didn't know which category it fell into. But he never thought that he should go back to first principles. He was just saying, okay, there's one type of vessel, which category that already exists does it go into? And even he was worried that maybe in other places there'll be similar looking things that are scientifically different. So he didn't rely just on his science. And the Steichemet said that this is why the Ashkenazim didn't agree with the Radbaz and didn't do this research. So sof davar. Therefore, we only have the custom of our fathers. So God forbid we should overturn entire categories in halacha. The tradition of halacha is holy. We shouldn't turn left or right. Only one who follows its light is going on the right path. Okay, so let's summarize what we have. And again, I said that I think methodologically speaking, this question is a pretty good indication of a lot of, right, the directions that those can take on a lot of these types of things. Because this is not the only area of halacha where halacha seems to be based on a scientific fact that either Chazal got wrong, or in this case, science has just changed. Right? Meaning, right? In this case, you don't have to say Chazal were wrong. You just say, no, literally, we have new materials. They were completely right, but we have new materials. Methodologically, you have the option of saying, close our eyes to evidence. Right? And we saw certain people who said, you know what, it's not true. Right? It's just not true. Either because we don't believe the evidence, we didn't really see that today, or because it's too dangerous. Either because overturning categories of halacha will weaken people's commitment, or because it'll cause halachic chaos if we start overturning principles. And therefore, or because, like Rosh Hashanah, it's not, maybe eventually we'll change the halacha, but right now the reality we live in is frozen in time, and we have to wait for a Sanhedrin to do such fundamental changes to halacha. Right? That's one extreme. Slightly less extreme is to say, that's our starting point, but we won't deny that such a leniency exists if we need to pull it out in emergencies. Right? But that's really camp one, right? Which is either rejected entirely or rejected almost entirely unless really, really, really pressured. All the way the other extreme are poskim who say, look, if halacha is based on a certain scientific reality, so then when the scientific reality either changes or turns out to be wrong, right, this is a particularly easy case, because they'll say, look, if the problem is that maybe Chazal were wrong, that's dangerous. But here it's not were Chazal right or wrong. This is a different material. We already have models of vessels that don't absorb. It just happens to be that the science is that many more of our vessels fall in that category. So therefore, what's the problem? Let's just change the paradigm. Right? That's the other extreme. And then there's all these middle positions, which is either for local halachic reasons or for policy reasons to take a middle position. Okay? The halachic reason here to take a middle position is maybe there's a distinction between koshering, which is a formal ritual mitzvah, and all the laws of is it post facto kosher, which is a scientific question. Right, so that's basically Rav Rabinovich, which is, and Rav Malamud. Part one. Koshering is a mitzvah, it doesn't change. Kashrut of things with absorption is a scientific question, it does change. But then there's policy issues, which is, other halachic issues that would point to that, which is, there's taste, it may be 1 in a million, but you don't rely on it ab initio, post facto, it's fine. Right? These are halachic reasons to take middle positions to distinguish between koshering and post facto. And then there's policy concerns, which is, yes, it will be fine, but it would have to be clean. And you start using the same pots, people won't necessarily clean it well enough. And that really is a problem. They'll end up cooking milk and meat together because, right, they'll be using the same pot and there'll be a little bit of this and a little bit of that left on it. In general, in milk and meat, we try to distance things to prevent problems. So why are you going to jump in? Right, that's his other argument. Riv Lior, which is, yes, it would be mutter, but shaking people's emunah in the halachic system by totally changing the way they experience is not something I jump to. And therefore, it may not be wrong, but don't run into it. Right? Don't run into it. So, Right? These are halachic and policy concerns, which will point in this middle direction. And in general, as I said, I think that this is indicative of the way poskim deal with all these types of issues. Right? You'll have those poskim who say halacha never changes because fundamentally we don't believe in science, or we think that the Torah transcends the science. Even though it seems to be based on the reality, it's not. It transcends the reality. Right? You'll have poskim who say, look, halacha gives us principles. Principles then have to be applied to reality. And if the reality changes, halacha changes, and that's all there is to it. And then there are people who say, look, there are different halachic concerns and different policy concerns that will tell us we don't deny the reality, but we don't deny the danger, halachic or policy, in making radical changes, even if they can be justified halachically. So let's try to come up, right? Let's try to string that thread and be careful, right? In this case, there are halachic reasons to it, in addition to policy reasons. Sometimes there are only policy reasons, right? In this case, you have both. So as we've said, again, to summarize the halacha, so you have the Rosh Shlomo Zalman camp, or Rav Shechter camp, which is basically, it's always usher, right? Unless maybe in the most extenuating of circumstances. You have the theoretical position that no one seems to actually really take, which is, yes, let's just be makil. Rav Lior says, I'm in theory willing to do that, but for policy reasons I'm not. But and then you have the middle positions, right? Rav Malamud, who says koshering is formal, and there's a problem so post facto it's fine, but I would never tell you not to kosher. Rav Rabinovich, who says, goes a little bit farther than Rav Malamud, which is it's not about koshering versus post facto, it's about lechatchila b'diavad, right? Presumably Rav Malamud would say that in a hotel or the army, he would say you should still lechatchila kosher, right? Because his argument's that koshering is a mitzvah, and that you shouldn't rely on bittul, would still apply in a hotel or in the army. Rav Rabinovich, who says it's simply lechatchila b'diavad, not this mitzvah of koshering, he is willing to go a little bit farther and say if it's a situation which is already extenuating, so then because shasatcha k'di'evedami, that once it's extenuating, you're allowed to rely on post facto leniency and ab initio. Again, I'm not sure if Malam would be comfortable with that. The last point I would make is what I said before, is that this is an early version of Malamud's article from about 3-4 years ago already. He wrote at the time that he was still working through things, because we've talked about the way this works for pots and pans and mixed milk and meat and stuff like that. It obviously will have indications for davar charif, right? All the chumrot that you've ever heard of onions and garlic and stuff like that, are dependent on this, right? All those halacha could disappear in an instant if you take this model. I don't know, and I will, when I know, I will give you the update. I don't know whether if Malamud has changed his mind in the last few years as he has reached publication. This was his initial information-seeking article, because at the end there was, if anyone has questions, comments, thoughts, please let me know, and as I'm formulating my final position. So it could be that he became more lenient, it could be he became more strict, I'm not 100% sure. Or I think I mentioned this before, that as one of my friends, or one of my colleagues when I was in the Kollel, right, Avram Stav, said, he posted a few months ago on Facebook, that when people ask him kasher shaylas, he says, this is the halacha now, but I don't know what it will be once Panini Halacha on Kashrut is published, because Malamud is a very influential posek, because of how clear he writes, because of how well he is at advertising his stuff, because he puts his sefer online for free in Hebrew and English and French and Spanish and Russian, and every year has a deal where he sends out the books to shuls for like 200 shekel for the whole set, and if you want a second language, sends it for free, and then he makes Panini Halacha for kids, right? The combination of being a good writer, a very serious posek, and being an excellent marketer has made it that his work is very, very influential. So I can't honestly tell you what this halacha will look like in Israel in a few years, because it could be that Rav Malamud took an even more lenient position in the published work, and that as that gets shipped out to shuls around the country, poskim will become more comfortable with it, because people will become more comfortable. I don't know. I really have no idea. Or it could be that there'll be a real pushback, right? And people will, or there'll be a divide between, different parts of the community. I don't know. What I wanted to do today was outline the methodological moves that are being made and the directions that can be taken. Which direction Rav Melamed himself took, I don't know, in his final version, and the way it'll be accepted by the community, I'm not sure the answer is, people always want to know, like, well, where are we going to be in 10 years? Is it going to become more accepted? I don't know. I could see it becoming more accepted. I could see it becoming less accepted, right? I could see there being a real, pushback because of the destabilizing nature, or because poskim are just convinced by the halachic arguments of the machmirim or the mekilim, right? I could see this going in three directions, right? I could see the future becoming more machmir, where people double down. I could see people being convinced by the science, and eventually, the more the laity becomes aware of the issues, the more poskim will be comfortable changing it, like Rev Lior-esque, right? Because Rev Lior basically says it should really be mutter, but I'm afraid because I don't want to just be makil. But if other people are willing to be makil, then I'll be makil. So will other poskim be makil? Maybe. Or will this middle compromise position emerge as the dominant one, which is still kosher, still keep separate kitchens, but recognize that for b'diavad shaylas, right, post facto you can be makil? Will that win? My guess is that either that's going to win or the machmir position is going to win the day. I just sort of my feel of the way politics, like, Jewish halachic politics and policy works in the community, I can't imagine that the position is going to win of just throw it all in the garbage. Both for the halachic reasons that Rav Melamed outlines, which is koshering seems to be a mitzvah, and we don't rely on bittul lechatchila, and we really do try to separate milk and meat, right? On this particular issue, I can't imagine that we're going to go all the way to the extreme, but I wouldn't be shocked if some version of this middle approach, right, which for halachic and policy reasons tries to come up with this middle position. If that won, I'm not putting my name behind it. I'm not, but I'm not, I could see that happening. And I would just say that keep in mind these models as you analyze any other topics, and on this particular issue, keep your eyes open as it becomes published, and if people start talking about it and becomes, a big argument like it did 3 years ago when the article came out, so then you'll know why, and you'll know what they're talking about. And because Melamed puts everything online for free, in English also, right, once the final one is up, you don't need me. You can just, when I hear that it's out, I'll tell you, and you can go online and, read it in whatever language you want, and see how he came out. Okay, that's it. Any questions, or otherwise you have to go to... Okay.